negotiation, if they're feeling like they don't have to sell that day, or if they haven't sold anything all day long, they may be pretty understanding and flexible in that negotiation. But it's routine and it's instinctive. That's my point. They negotiate for everything. And Americans aren't accustomed to this. I don't normally go into, the only time you negotiate in America is when you buy a car, which is a strange kind of circumstance, really. That's the only true area where there's some serious exchange of ideas and negotiation. And so what I want you to do is kind of think about those kinds of scenarios and think about maybe the value of getting a little more skill or at least just awareness of what happens in these. And the reason why I'm doing this, of course, is because there's two ways to go about it. One is kind of burn bridges behind positional bargaining. This is what happens when most of us buy a car. Especially if you're like me, I buy a car and run it for 10 or 12 years. I mean, I don't buy cars very often, so I don't, I'm not going to go back to the car dealer after 3 years and buy another one. I teach in the humanities. So, positional bargaining, that's what I do with that guy, because it's not a long-term thing. But now, principled negotiation, that's your goal. That's what you do when you can do it right. And that means, really, in principled negotiation, I'm developing a relationship. I'm going to be a buyer from this guy regularly. As in a case where I sell whirligigs, and Ben is the head of a company that produces the raw material that I use to make whirligigs. It's in my interest to have a long-term business relationship with Ben. He wants to sell his raw material at a good price. I want to buy a lot of it at a good price. We just don't want to have a one-time deal where I try to get the best of him or he tries to get the best of me. We want to have a long-term principled negotiation where we both benefit from a long-term arrangement. That's where we're going with negotiation. Okay? Let's see if I can make heads or tails out of this. Two types. Each party declares, this is going to be on the middle page, so just annotate, right? Take what notes you want. Think about the car sale, right? If I go to my neighbor and he's selling his Camaro, and I say, well, what do you want for it? We've just started the negotiation. So he says his price, well, I'd like $3,000 for it. And I go, oh, I was thinking $2,500. Now, each party has declared a position. Now you start working your way to the middle, right? You argue on your own behalf. He says something, well, it's a single owner car, and I've always had the maintenance done. And I go, well, it's got some rust on it. And those tires are worn out, right? So we argue on our own behalf. Both of us, hopefully, will make some concessions, and then eventually, we kind of meet in the middle. There's a compromised agreement. Okay? We kind of work our way toward what we can accept in terms of an agreement, if there's going to be an agreement reached. Right? Stop me if I'm going to pick up the speed a little bit, because I think this is fairly simple stuff. Going on to principled negotiation. Rather than bluff, sometimes you bluff in a positional bargain. You actually ask more than you think you're ever going to get. Why? You're trying to set the price higher, right? Well, what you do over here is, as I was talking about, Ben is selling the raw material and I'm producing the whirligigs. We're going to talk to each other about what our capacities are, what our projects are, what sort of size contracts we have. We're going to reveal a lot about what we can and cannot do and what we need to each other, and that way we reach a better agreement. Rather than looking for a one-time deal and run out the door before he figures out I've screwed him over, we're actually trying to help each other out in this case, right? It's a principle. You get that? That's why they call it a principled negotiation. And sometimes, because the two of you are working together, you might invent a solution. The two of you together. Maybe he is producing the ore or the raw material that I use, and maybe transportation is being done by a third party. Maybe the two of us go together and buy a fleet of trucks. And now we're shipping his stuff to my location, and we're splitting the profit rather than paying a middleman. Okay? And hopefully, you're going to get long terms, not just the one-time deal, where you may or may not win, depending on market value and all the rest, but it's something that's going to be a long-term success. Okay. So, positional. let you know. For example, I've put my car on the market and I've been trying to sell it for 3 months and nobody has shown any interest. And you're the first guy to walk in the yard and says, well, I'm interested in your car. I go, oh yeah, a lot of people have been seeing my car, right? Yeah, that's, a lot of people want to buy it. I've got another guy on the phone inside. I just hung up, right? Why am I doing that? Because I want him to think he needs to pay a lot more money than he wants to, right? Commonly, it's a one-time, as I say, burn the bridges behind you and get it done quick, right? That's what you want to do. You want to make that deal today. Urgency usually drives the deal, and the goal is to win. You don't really care what happens to the other guy. You're not going to see him again. And so, when the stakes are high, like a car, any of you have gone through a car purchase recently? If you have, let me tell you something. If you are so unfortunate as to buy it at a car dealership, be prepared for about 4 to 6 hours. Even if you don't negotiate hard, they'll still work you over because they capitalize on your fatigue as part of their negotiation strategy. I'm not making this up. You read the book. Okay? Think about it. So, they're looking to take advantage of you, and basically you're looking to take advantage of them. Okay? What you know is power, and you don't share it. You're going to practice the 80-20 rule. Are any of you familiar with the 80-20 rule? It basically says, every time you ask me a question and I tell you an answer, that's the 20%. I want to ask for 4 more pieces of information from you because information is negotiating power. The more I know about this vehicle, the more I know about its service history, the more I know about how it's been driven, the better I am in a position to assess its value and know whether I'm getting a good deal or not. Right? So the 80-20 rule, always go for more information. Information is power. Set up your goal beforehand. Now, in a case like the situation with Lear, there's no setting up beforehand, of course. That kind of came out by surprise. No one knew he was going to ask for his daughters to give a performance on how much they loved to do, right? But if you're going into a negotiation, you do want to set up your ideas beforehand. And what do you think would be a success? If you're thinking, if I sell the car for $2,800, I'm going to be happy. Okay. Well, then if the guy starts off at 25, you go, I'm going to have to go higher than that or I can't sell it to you. Right? And ask questions. Because information, as I say, follow that 80-20 rule. Get more information. All the information. When's the last time it was maintained? You changed the oil line? You got those receipts? You know, has it ever been right? If I call Carfax, are they going to know anything? You know, information. This can only help you. Okay. Unless he's just lying. That's a whole different ball. He who speaks first loses usually. Have you ever thought about that? How does that work out? Because one guy, let's say I'm selling and he says, what do you want for it? And I say $2,800. Well, then the price is going to be under 28. It can't go above it. He's not going to pay me more than I want for it.
Got to show your cards first.
There you go. So be aware of that. You might want to hesitate before you tell him a price. And if he asks you how much you want for it, you may just avoid that question and say, well, I've only had it for so many years. You know. Bluffing is useful, but it can be. Always remember that bluffing can backfire. So you want to be careful. One of the questions you want to know on the way in the door is it okay if you walk out without the deal? In other words, can you just simply walk away from this? If you can bluff hard, because if it doesn't work, you can always just walk away from the deal. They just say, I'll try again next time. But you have to know that going in. Have your strategy. Know what's going to happen. And use the flinch. Are you familiar with this? Because my wife is a wonder at this. She is really, well, she grew up in a country where negotiation was part and parcel of life. And so when someone says something to her and she says, that's, you see, she kind of shrugs her shoulders, and it's almost like this physical pain. Oh, that's such a high price. You're asking so much. She does it subconsciously. It's just natural for her. Okay? And I would be standing there going, oh, really? Because I'm dope. You know, this is why my wife handles most of our negotiations. She's good at it. And as I said, maintain your power to walk away without a deal if you can. But if you can't, don't you dare admit it. You know, don't say something like, I've got to sell it today because my tax bill is due, and if I don't pay, I'm going to jail. They've got you over a barrel then. You just gave them the gun and said, please shoot, right? Okay. Now, here's what I really want to talk about. Principle negotiation. Some principles of positional bargaining apply, but they're only those that don't violate relationships, because this is about relationships. As I said, this is about Kent and Lear. I'm thinking of them primarily as I talk about this. Kent and Lear. How does Kent get Lear to quit firing the gun at himself? Right? Mutual trust and commonly a long-term focus are the keys. So in other words, if you don't trust one another, and I think definitely Lear and Kent do trust one another, they're long-term friends, long-term comrades, and commonly a long-term focus. Okay, that's very important. Now, if I'm just starting off in my negotiations with Ben because of the raw material his plant produces, then I am going to try and convince him I want to do this over a long-term focus. In other words, I'm not just going to be a customer today. I'm going to be a customer for the next 5 years. And maybe we'll even undertake some long-term contract negotiations with possibilities for long-term. And the goal here, look folks, is win-win. This is where you're headed with these negotiations. Be smart and go win-win. If you can win the trust of the people you are dealing with in a negotiation, this is a possible outcome. You can win, but you have to win their trust. How do you do that? By being forthcoming, by telling them what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and allowing them to understand where you're coming from. I need to make X amount of money to make my payroll. I need to have X amount of progress done, productivity, etc., etc. And of course, you want them to reveal information also. Remember, 80-20 doesn't apply here.